All right, we'll call this finance meeting to order. Please rise for the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, I need a motion to adopt the agenda, moved by Romano, supported by Lucido. Please vote on your iPads. Okay, unanimously. Okay, the motion passes unanimously, 11-0. Approval of the minutes dated June 27, 2018. Moved by Commissioner Brown, supported by Commissioner Kraft. Please vote. Motion passes 11-0. Public participation. Does anyone wish to be heard? Anyone wish to be heard? Seeing none, we'll close public participation. Presentations, GCSI second quarter update. Mr. Owen.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Commissioners, for having us. If it works, I sent over a written update that has several bills, including some links in it electronically that I would encourage folks to take a look at, and I won't go into all of them in depth. But the reason I included several were in the early parts of this year, the governor and the legislature took a hard look at a lot of skilled trades work. A lot of work that is probably outside of the more recent economic development mode that you would see, a lot of legislation take. And, these bills are, as the governor would say, more aimed towards folks that aren't going to graduate school, that aren't going to, higher education, but are identified as part of the talent shortage. If you start to work with economic development experts around the state, and I'm sure here in Macomb, there's a pretty wide gap in a lot of these types of positions. And several of these bills were passed, including $100 million for the governor in the Marshall Plan that'll be doled out, and that distribution is also provided electronically in the update. But I thought if it works to give a general update, a general update on what the legislature's up to, and politics is at the top of the mind in Lansing between now and the end of the year, and run through some of the electoral things, run through some of the stated goals of kind of the leaders in both houses and the governor and between now and the end of the year, and then answer any questions that folks may have based on individual subject areas. So today the House is still maintained by a majority of Republicans, 63-47. The Senate with the supermajority that really came in 2010 at 26-11. Republican governor, Republican attorney general, Republican secretary of state, and so there's not been, I would say, a ton of legislative activity really since almost September to November of last year. Most of the focus has been political, and as the chambers start to look at what the majorities could look like early on, you have 20 of the 26 Republicans in majority term limited in the Senate. When that happens, of course, you have a majority, a large number of folks in the House eyeing those open Senate seats, including all three of the open Senate seats in Macomb. So several of those House members will be eyeing that. I think that the Dems feel hopeful and the Republicans feel confident, and I think that's the easiest way to put it right now. I think that polling would suggest that it's very close and that nobody could really give any sort of prediction for November on really any of the statewide races, or the legislative races. I think the Republicans do expect to maintain majority. I would say that the odds are that they will. These are still districts that were drawn in 2010, after 2010 census, drawn with all three branches controlled by Republican majority, and the lines are favorable. With that said, you have an August primary coming up on August 7th, and then of course the general election, and so all of that to say there's not a ton of legislative activity to update outside of the budget, and we'll get into a couple of those things. But for the most part, all eyes in Lansing are out of town. They're at the doors and really working a lot of the politics that are necessary to get reelected. The legislature is not in session really at all through September. They'll come in for a couple weeks on and off, and then come back in full time after the November election, and then for a pretty, I would say, long scheduled lame duck, especially if one or both of those houses were to change. You could see a lot of activity in that last 12 days of lame duck. Last term, over 58% of total legislation passed in the 12 days of lame duck. So if you've got thousands of bills getting introduced, for that large of a percentage to pass in those 12 days, it can roll pretty quickly. So there's a lot of work that's done between now and then to prepare for some of those things, and I'll mention a couple of those as well. I'd say the first, substantive and policy-based piece that we've been working pretty hard on now for years, that you're all aware of, is the community mental health piece. During the Medicaid rebasing, again, as most of you know, the average hit to counties was 2, 3, 4%. In Macomb, it was 18%. And we approached the legislature and the administration a couple of years ago and talked to them about how abnormal that hit was to Macomb. You'll remember the last budget cycle, we were able to achieve $5 million in general fund towards a $12.5 million ask. That was positive movement. This cycle, I would say that the county had two major budgetary priorities. One was to close the gap on the remaining $7.5 million in community mental health. We met, we had hundreds of meetings in Lansing and worked until the last day of the budget, and we were only able to achieve $1 million of the remaining 7.5. But I'm still hopeful that there'll be another look at this fall, and I say that because legislative leaders in both chambers are in control of caucuses that are heading into primary season. And what I think that they wanted to avoid, I think the governor's office wanted to avoid, was a budget that was filled with a lot of, some people would call it pork, other people would call it, important projects. And, I think this would fall out of the scope of the word pork and into something that, is really important to Macomb County. And for that reason, I think the pot of money that's typically identified for discretionary spending was lower this year than it has been in the last few years. Heading into election, they wanted to show fiscal responsibility. They wanted to show that they were, really, putting as much money as they could into the roads. And a lot of that discretionary money did go into the formula. And they will do a supplemental probably in November. And so we've already started conversations, and it's our understanding that there'll be another look at a lot of these things that maybe didn't make it to where folks wanted them to be, to try and get into that supplemental funding bill, which will really be the last major funding bill or last bill that the governor will move through on the budgetary side. So we're hopeful that we're going to be able to get another chunk of money towards that remaining now $6.5 million. We got $1 million in, and then also we're going to take another run at at trying to get some money for the proposed Great Lakes Nature Center over at Metro Beach for the zoo, and trying to see if there would be a a private public match that was proposed. It didn't make the cut for several reasons, but and most of which I've already mentioned. And I think that this supplemental and then early next year, I think there's an opportunity to continue to close that gap. We're certainly not going to stop talking to folks about the importance of filling the rest of that 12.5 million with general fund dollars for CMH. Any questions on the CMH piece in particular? For sure.
Let's start with Commissioner Carabelli.
Actually, mine deals with roads, which he was just talking about. Maybe I can ask him a question. Fair enough.
No problem.
Oh, sorry, Commissioner Duje.
Thank you. This is regards to CMH, actually. My understanding was last year they were working on the 7.5 million, and that it was looking good for the 7.5. Now you're saying we got $1 million, we're still 6.5. If you were a betting man, let's put it that way, are we going to get the 6.5 or not?
If I could predict
Be so
legislative,
bold.
yeah, if I could predict legislative behavior, I probably wouldn't be standing here. I promise. But I would say that last year's budget cycle, we got the first step towards it was 12.5, and we got
Right.
5 million, and now we got 1. I think that we'll continue to chip away, and I say that, and I should probably give a little broader context statewide. You have a CMH, essentially a CMH, as far as the individual CMHs are concerned, I would say that they would identify it as a crisis, following the rebasing. But you have other issues, and there's another issue: the disabled, aging, and blind migration, which essentially started happening where individuals that were qualifying for a disabled, aging, and blind program were moved almost unintentionally onto Healthy Michigan, which took a ton of money out of CMHs across the state, and it had a disparate impact on different CMHs. And in one in particular on the west side, Lakeshore went completely bankrupt and went through its reserves. They were actually disproportionately awarded with $7 million in this budget because they had burned through their reserves, where Mr. Kinch did not.
We've been very we've been conservative with our money here. We've got some terrific plans and so on and so forth. And I'm frankly, last year, towards the end of the year, there were a number of assurances made, let's call it, that the 7.5 million would happen, and it didn't. And I'm just wondering if we've got to worry or come up with more, with a better budget, and how much more we're going to have to chop.
Yeah, so for the remaining $6.5 million, I think it's safe practices to never rely on the legislature on some sort of future GF. We don't know what the future of the GF will look like, but I should say that the Macomb County Legislative Delegation deserves a lot of credit for how hard they fought for those dollars. They came together, Republicans and Democrats, all 10 of them, sent a letter to the Speaker, sent a letter to the House Appropriations Chair, and so did all 3 senators from Macomb, telling them how important it was. It did fall short, and I think the reason it fell short was because they had those hard caps on some of that discretionary spending this time compared to what they had in the past. I'm hopeful that we're going to get more money in the fall, and I'm hopeful that in the next budget cycle we'll clean up the.
Well, I'd like to see a
number.
good dent put into it. Let's put it that way.
No, I think that's right. On the DAB migration, though, just briefly, it's still under the CMH umbrella. Macomb is going to get an additional $4 million in a supplemental that we moved alongside the budget, which included a large number statewide to try and pacify some of the concerns that happened in that that DAB migration. So it's not the same pot of money.
Right.
If you asked, I think if you asked Mr. Kinch, he would say, it still doesn't look at this general fund issue that we're facing after the Medicaid rebasing, but obviously it's anytime you're getting $4 million, it's not a negative thing. So that was an additional $4 million that came in that program in this budget.
All right. Keep working at it. Thank you, Gary. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Okay, we'll go ahead and go through the rest of it. Well, he already mentioned Leonetti's too, and he may have already mentioned Carabelli's. So then I have to start at the, okay, go ahead.
So just briefly on roads, I think the general consensus in Lansing on roads is that there's no legislative will right now to do anything major. Now, when I say that, it seems as if every quarter they dump another big chunk of excess revenue that's coming in as these, excess revenues do come in. 175 million earlier in the year, 300 or 400 depending on which number you're looking at this time around, maybe more money in the fall towards the supplemental. And when you put those, together, you get up to the $700, $800, $900 million number, and they can be considered, together, maybe a bigger number than on their own. I think for Macomb County, there's two major issues heading into next year. You're going to have a new governor, completely new legislature, new, of course, new MDOT director, and trying to take a look at repositioning dollars back to where people live, as opposed to the antiquated, Act 51 that's based on road miles and therefore disproportionately goes up north. I don't know the likelihood. The likelihood's probably very small of a major Act 51 rewrite as long as, folks who are in power are from out state. And I think that's still true today. We started seeing it form in really 2010, but Senate Majority Leaders from West Olive, Senate Appropriations Chairs from Grand Rapids area, House Appropriations Chairs from Livonia, but the speakers from DeWitt, his number 2 is from Petoskey. And the reality is that the power in the legislature is just not in Southeast Michigan. And until that changes, those dollars are going to continue to flow out state. I'd say that the same thing is true of CMH. The Medicaid rebasing happened, and those dollars flew out of Southeast Michigan. And so the next governor will probably come into $1 billion rainy day fund that they'll be able to access if they please for roads. The next governor will come in with some sort of honeymoon with the legislature. What their priorities will be, we'll see. Both candidates on the Republican side have said that they're willing to look at new revenue options, which is always a step in the right direction. On the Democratic side, all of those candidates have said that they want to look at new revenue for roads. So I definitely think it will be topic 1A in January, and something that we'll obviously be trying to get as much as possible back to Southeast Michigan. Just a few other things, and just to cap off for what will happen for the rest of the year. They will come back after Labor Day, do some brief activity, and then come in after the election, and then really go for that 12 to 14 days. We hope to have a pretty good idea when we come back before the election for an election update and for a lame duck kind of preview idea on where we sit on some of those individual pieces. So with that, I'll take questions.
Thank you. Commissioner Carabelli.
The report that you're giving us is from covering through the date written, or is it just for the month of June?
So obviously there was a lot of activity in June, right? If you looked at the calendar, following spring break and really before that in an election year, there hasn't been.
So it's a snapshot, not all the stuff.
Yeah, certainly,
Okay.
not all the bills that have passed.
The prevailing wage repeal, that wasn't something that we should probably be talking about?
Well, the prevailing wage piece passed by, they put the signatures on the ballot and the legislature rubber stamped it.
Right. So my question is, we have a lot of contracts going out. We have a lot of contracts that are out. We have a lot of contracts in process. We have a lot of people in the state have no idea what that means. So I'm asking you, did you communicate anything to the executive's office, to the Department of Roads, to the contracts that we have with construction companies? Do we have to fulfill those? Do we have to just say, no, stop right here? What's the status, Gladys?
So I'd say two things. One, I would defer to legal counsel on how that's going to play out. I certainly would expect a lot of litigation and things that'll be in place on trying to figure a lot of that out. It's way above my pay grade to give the executive's office advice on any of those contracts. But of course, the repealing of the prevailing wage is the law of the land. And so I think they're going to work that out in court, and a lot of those things will be settled.
Well, it's tough because in the line of work that I do, I get some contractors will send me a letter saying, hey, by the way, that's not prevailing wage anymore. Another one saying, oh, no, I think we still have to do it. So there's a lot of confusion out there, and being that the fiduciary of the tax dollars, if we're signing contracts and we're not supposed to be signing contracts, and it's 15% higher we're paying because of they think they should be doing it, there's got to be some clear direction coming out here to give all the municipalities of what we're supposed to do. So I don't know if there's any information you can share with us. I tried to Google as much stuff as I could, and I really couldn't find a whole lot.
Yeah, I like I said, I do think that it's not decided yet. I think there'll be some litigation, and there'll be, I would defer to legal counsel on whatever their opinion is going to be on any of those individual contracts, when they start, how it's going to impact those, et cetera.
Okay, all right, thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Commissioner Leonetti.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good to see you. Thanks for coming in and giving us your report. You kind of answered some of the questions when you got into like Public Act 51 and the nature of the power, I guess, locales in the legislature. But I guess I'm going to give you a question. Phil Kraft kind of gave me an answer, but maybe you can give me an answer that's similar or different. And this is not just for Macomb County. I think this would be for all of southeastern Michigan. So let's include Wayne County, let's include Oakland County, and let's include, let's say, Washtenaw County. I got to imagine, okay, that, and make it not a Republican or Democrat thing. All politics is really local. In fact, I'll give you an example here. I'm a Democrat. Candace Miller, who's a Republican, wrote an excellent article about Public Act 51 in the Macomb Daily. And it was talking about how it's antiquated and it's simply not fair. I mean, you've got Ironwood, Michigan, has 2-lane highways, and maybe now and then a semi-truck will go down there. And then you've got Macomb County here on Mound Road, where we've got major automobile plants where semi-trucks are going down daily, 24 hours a day. We're going to have Amazon in Shelby, okay, and the roads are crumbling. So how is it if I take Macomb, I take Wayne, I take Oakland, and I take Washtenaw County, there's got to be more legislators in those 4 counties than is for all the other counties combined. And I just don't understand why we are not, as either through SEMCOG or something, lobbying to say, look, this act has got to be removed. It's not fair at all. It just doesn't make any sense. And that's the primary reason. We're not getting any revenue sharing. That's why these roads are crumbling. That's why when I go knocking on doors and I have constituents mad, and I try to explain to them, this is what's going on. We're just not getting the money. We're getting the same amount of money as Ironwood, Michigan, which frankly, I don't even think has a 4-lane highway anywhere up there. So what are you doing as a lobbyist, or what do you think can be done as a lobbyist to change that thing? Because again, I don't think it's a Republican or Democratic thing. It's a locality thing. And we as southeastern Michigan should form a coalition to knock that Public Act 51 back out and put in something more appropriate.
And that might end up being the answer. It might end up being a ballot initiative that repeals the act. I mean, the reality is there's 100 different ways that the next governor could come in and try to leverage, that piece, right? There's a lot of discretionary dollars in the MDOT budget. There's nothing keeping the governor from taking 100% of the discretionary dollars and giving it to Southeast Michigan until people came to the table on Act 51. There's ballot initiatives, I think, that the next governor may have to go outside the legislature to look at the roads. I think, when the original roads package passed, the number that was presented to the legislature was that they were 1.2 billion short every year for 10 years in order to even catch up and get to where you want to be from a safety perspective. Now that number, even with the new money, is probably up to 1.8 billion per year for 10 years. I don't know that the legislature will have the will to inject 1.8 billion in new revenue through some sort of tax increase or shift in revenue next term. And if they're not, whoever is governor is going to have to figure out what they want to do with it. It has been lobbied about as hard as it could possibly be lobbied. The reality is the legislative will just isn't there. They feel that they took a good shot at it. They made several steps at getting new revenue in the system, and now with some of these tax revenues that are coming from other places, you've seen surpluses. They've taken, I would say, 75% of every surplus and put it towards the roads. So they realize that it's a problem. The reality is that, the majority of the legislature today doesn't believe that they need to raise taxes, period.
And I'm not, here's the thing, that's a whole different thing. I mean, and I don't want to get into debate and waste everybody's time, but you could raise taxes, but if we have the same formula, what's the difference?
Well, there's ways to do it. There, like I said, there's discretionary dollars, and then there's Act 51 dollars, and anytime, as in Lansing, anytime some of these road bills are going, it's what percentage is going to go to the formula versus what percentage is going to go towards. There's ways to earmark those dollars. It doesn't have to go to Act 51. Act 51, of course, by its name, was created in 1951.
Right.
I mean,
that's what I mean.
It's
I mean,
absurd.
that's the problem. It's absurd.
Yeah.
We're dealing with 1951 legislation and 21st century roads. And look at, with everything that goes on now, Amazon and all the stuff that's shipped to people's homes, trucking is even more prominent than it was in 1951. So, whatever you can do, not just for Macomb County, but whatever you can do in talking to other colleagues that represent the other counties in southeastern Michigan, like Oakland, I don't know if you do, or Washtenaw, I don't know if you do, or Wayne County, something's got to be done, and it's got to be looked at as not a partisan thing, but really where we live and how we're being affected, and or more appropriately, how we're getting screwed under Public Act 51. That's my comment.
And just a quick reaction without trying to ever be patronizing at all, but Macomb County is about as relevant as any county in the state when it comes to statewide elections. These gubernatorial candidates are going to come here. They're going to be calling each one of you all, asking for time, asking for support, asking for endorsements. I think that framing the conversation here about the fact that roads has got to be the number one issue, what is, how do you plan to fix it, will force a debate heading into November on how each candidate does plan to fix it. Trying to dig into details. What percentage what do you think about Act 51? I think that'll be a pretty telling sign of how some of this stuff plays out through November and into January. It's definitely going to be a multi-year debate until, more and more capital just gets injected. But yeah, believe me, I appreciate your frustration and confusion about Lansing. There's nothing that isn't confusing about Lansing. So,
Well, thanks for giving us some insight. That's the best you can do. All right, thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Chair Smith.
Hi, Gary. Thanks for coming by today and giving us this update. I kind of heard, I was reading through some of the material for today, and I heard you mention something about the zoo and their, I believe it probably is that nature center that they were talking to us a long time ago about, that they've picked a place already?
I don't know if a particular piece or a space was identified. I've heard Various folks mentioned Metro Beach in that area. I don't know for a fact, but I do know that the legislature and others were working towards looking at some sort of public partnership where the legislature might be able to put a dollar amount in with a requisite match in the private sector of 3 or 4 times, and I know that was very close to making it, and actually, again, kind of fell victim at the very last second. I think, in fact, it was probably in there at one point, and during some of the scuffle in the last week or two came out. But the request that was in was 2.5 million, and I believe that, there was going to be some requisite match dollars that were going to come on the private side.
Okay,
for building it.
I hadn't heard about the state about it. I know they came to us, and I don't know if Deputy Executive Delden knows anything more about it, but I know they came to us to try to talk about a property donation, or that they were going to come with X amount of dollars. I mean, do you have any further update on any of that, or?
I would just say that they approached the state, I think, to make something clear that they wanted to locate a nature center in Macomb, period, and that they were going to do that, and they're looking for a partnership to make it come to life. What that looks like in its eventual form, I think, could come in the supplemental, and I'm not sure what, but I think that they are still dedicated to putting something in Macomb for that nature center and trying to work with everybody to get it done.
Then Metro Beach just came out of.
I believe
I'm sorry. I only caught part of it.
Yeah, so I believe that came from something I read where Candace Miller had said something to publicly to the legislature about that as a location, but please don't quote me on that. I can go back and look at that.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Point of information, I think when the gal was here from the parks, she mentioned that as well.
Well, as a possibility, but I thought maybe you mentioned it more like it was more of a done deal. That's why I just wanted to check on
No,
that.
it's certainly not a done deal. It was in concept only. I think it still is, as they try to figure out how to get this thing done.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, thank you. A couple of questions. How many statewide ballot proposals are on the August primary?
At the risk of getting that wrong, I think it would be easier if I could maybe just send a descriptor, which I have, of each one of the ballot initiatives that so
Okay.
far has achieved signature, and I can send that to Crystal and Patty, if that
Okay.
works.
And I'm guessing you don't know on November, but are we looking at are our residents going to see 20 ballot proposals, or is it just a couple in August and a lot in November? Do you have any idea?
State or local or combined?
State, I'm not trying to get you to.
I believe that the current number is up over 10.
For August or November?
November.
Okay.
So, you have, of course, the redistricting ballot that's being heard by the Supreme Court today, on whether or not that'll make the ballot initiative. The prevailing wage piece has already been enacted. Medical marijuana recreational marijuana will be on the ballot. There may be, like I said, I think it's best if I just send a primer that has, because I have it all laid out
Okay.
in a summary that's pretty easy. I can just ship it over.
Okay, thank you. And when you say the governor may have to go outside the legislature, are you talking about public-private partnerships? Is that what you're referring to?
No, I guess I was referring to the possibility of the governor leading the charge, the next governor leading the charge on a ballot initiative to put something on the ballot. If, for example, the legislature does not want to cooperate on new revenue increases or a manipulation of Act 51, they may have to try to put something of their own on the ballot and champion it.
Okay. I serve on MAC, and the president of MAC said, I don't know what you're talking about. The roads are in pristine condition where I live. And he's running for the House. So I'm like, yeah, they're in pristine condition where you live. And I think a lot of those folks don't get down here. And I know it's not the same thing, but I just drove to Montana, and what I witnessed was them tearing apart perfectly good roads and replacing them so that they wouldn't lose that funding in the future. And I know that's interstate, but we're a donor state to the federal, to the state, and the state's a donor to the federal government. And for me to see that taking place, I was just like, oh my gosh, these roads are so good, and they're tearing them apart. It was just hard to see. Thank you. Commissioner Sagar.
Hey, Gary, I got a question for you. Do you ever think the state will reopen up the scales throughout the state? I've gone by in the last maybe week, and I've seen state police cars got trucks pulled over because of their weight problem, but all of our scales are closed.
It's a, you're,
And they can't tell me that financially it hurt because they'll get a feedback from the fines which they raise.
So there's a little controversy there because the fines that they raise go to the libraries based on
That's
the
been
Constitution.
state law for how many years?
Yeah. So it's actually a topic of debate. Is why isn't the state looking at overweight trucks? There's arguments on both sides on how overweight trucks impact the roads. One side says, semi trucks destroy the roads. Others say, look, if you start distributing that weight across multiple trucks, it's just as bad for the roads as putting all the weight on one truck. And if you start putting weight limits on the trucks, then you have two trucks to get the job done of one. Is it worse to have that second truck on the road or the one? So I do think that the next administration will probably look at that pretty quickly because it's a question that comes up all the time in Lansing is why aren't more of those weigh stations open?
Because if you've ever been behind a truck putting on their brakes, real quick, it goes like this, and that what that does to the roads, it just baffles them up. My other question, and I bring this up every year you come up here, and I've been talking about this for how many years, said I'm going to do it again. Does anybody have any, are they afraid, or I guess I'll put it this way, are they afraid of somebody in Lansing to incorporate these weights and measure guys on the road into going to become state troopers? Somebody's holding it up and somebody's afraid of something because these guys have no authority on the road with anything except trucks. If it's a drunk, and I've said this before, a drunk, they've got no authority to pull them over, okay? But if they went to a school, a part of the trooper school, for ticket writing, etc., they could become full-fledged troopers and go at the bottom of the line. But somebody's afraid of somebody up there, and I don't know who, but I bring it up every year.
Well, the answer is that it's a Department of Agricultural thing versus a state police thing, and that the agriculture producers and others, the agriculture stakeholders, which are, they're substantial, aren't going to lose resources out of weights and measures because they depend on a lot of that stuff in the unit, and they're not going to let them go to the state police. Whether or not that's a good idea or if it's just politics is, a question for another day, but maybe we should explore getting a bill introduced to look at it.
But nobody's got any guts to do it. And I've been sitting here a lot of years, and I bring it up every year, but it's the same thing, and I'll bring it up next year again.
I'll be back in October. We can
Okay.
we can
I
revisit
hope you
it.
talk to somebody. I'm talking to the guys in Warren.
Maybe we can find a bill sponsor to get some answers on it.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Thank you. I need a motion to receive and file. Moved by Leonetti, supported by Toko. Please vote. Motion passes 12-0. Department recommendations, waived by Infrastructure and Economic Development Committee Chair, contract DLZ Michigan Incorporated Architectural and Engineering Services for construction of vehicle maintenance facility. And I'm going to seek a motion. Moved by Duge, supported by Romano. Go ahead.
Hi, good afternoon,
Executive
Commissioners.
Delden.
As you know, the last couple of years, the Department of Roads budget has been carrying a placeholder of approximately $9 million. dedicated road dollars to replace the Clinton Service Center vehicle maintenance facility. We now are in the position of recommending an architect to design that. Back in the spring, there was RFPs that were put out, and comprehensive interviews were conducted by Brian Santo, our Director of Roads, Lynn Bricks from Facilities, other members of Roads, and also Plant Moran Cressa sat on that interview committee. They helped facilitate the process. You should have in your packet a bid tabulations, and after very thoughtful and in-depth review, we are recommending DLZ Michigan Incorporated to be awarded the architectural design contract for that vehicle maintenance facility. You should have all of that information included in your packet, and I have Andy Fountain and Brian Santo here to answer any specific questions regarding the vehicle maintenance facility itself. But with your approval today, we will at least begin the design phase, the schematic design phase of that facility.
Thank you. Commissioner Carabelli.
One quick question, more so for Steve, if he's still here. No.
What's the question?
It says in here, available in 2919 road capital project budget. I get it. So if we approve this, is this making the budget adjustment?
Yeah, there was so on Monday of this week, there was a budget amendment. I think it was Monday of this week, there was a budget amendment that was brought forward to make a budget amendment to take about $850,000, $8.5 million out of that 9 point, and to defer it into 2019.
Just to clarify, Commissioner Carabelli, that is the 9A on our agenda.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry about that.
Oh, that's okay.
Thank you.
Okay, seeing no other speakers, please vote. The motion passes 13-0.
Thank you.
Health and Human Service Committee recommendations. Are we okay doing A and B together? Motion by Duge, supported by Lucido. Seeing no questions, please vote. Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, Commissioner Gillette.
I'm going to vote yes on this motion for both of them because the one dealing with the MSU extension is just a transferring of the money from one pot essentially to the other. But I do believe we should look, as we move into budget negotiations, at the MSU extension. You know, we talk about our priorities on this board, and yet when the gentleman is here talking about what that particular individual does and talks about providing classes on gardening and providing classes on landscaping, all those things are easily available from many other sources, and I don't think that we should be spending our tax dollars on those items. But it's not relevant to this technical issue moving around, but I wanted to make that statement. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Gillette. Please vote. Okay, the motion passes 13-0. Infrastructure and Economic Development Committee recommendations. Before I seek a motion, I want to find out A through J, the questions that were regarding roads. Was everybody taken care of to their satisfaction? Okay, so I'll seek a motion for A through J. Moved by Romano, supported by Kraft. Seeing no questions, please.
One question. I just wondered, Brian, if you can just give us an update on Mound Road. I support all these items, and Mound is a big project. I'd just like to have a verbal report briefly. Thank you.
You're talking Mound Road that we're currently under construction with? We are moving according to schedule. You know, it is going to be the rest of the summer type project. We're doing 3.5 miles of that section from 14.5 to 18. So things are going well. We began milling the existing asphalt surface off, and we're starting to be doing the concrete pavement repairs and the joint repairs and the curb repairs as we go. I think we are down to 2 lanes as far as travel, north and southbound, and taking the outside lane as far as the milling surface. So,
Okay, are you hearing anything from the city of Sterling Heights or its residents, any complaints, anything at all that you're hearing?
With any type of project of this size and nature, we're going to get complaints and have gotten complaints about delays as far as
Right.
travel, but that's to be expected. We treat this project just as we treat every other project of this nature with our traffic control. Inevitably, there are going to be delays that people and motorists don't cherish, but it's just the nature of the beast.
Okay, thank
So,
you, Brian.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Please vote. Huh? Okay, the vote passes unanimously. Okay, item K, and we're gonna take this one individually because I do know there were no votes on this one. Budget Amendment, Information Technology Fund 2018 Capital Needs. Is there a motion? Moved by Lucido. Is there support? Okay, supported by Kraft. Let me get to the details because I don't see any questions. Are there? Yeah, so there's no discussion or anything? Okay, I didn't know if there'd be discussion, so. This is on the budget amendment. Did you have anything, Chair? Okay, well then, nobody has any questions. There will be a vote. He's thinking, hold on just a second. This is to forward to full board. Okay, please vote. Those were not, most of them weren't related to the budget amendment, they were related to L through P. Yes. So item K passes 11-1 with Commissioner Gillette voting no. So do you guys want to take these individually or do you want to take them all together? Together? I have a couple of questions, but I mean, I can take them together. Okay. All right, so I'll seek a motion for L through P. Okay. Well, maybe we should open up for questions. Were you going to make a motion? Okay, moved by Commissioner Myjack. Is there support? Oh, I'm sorry, support by Commissioner Romano. Thank you. Oh, I didn't mean to put my name first. There are no, I don't see any questions.
Point of information. Is Jake Oaks going to be here tomorrow? Is that my understanding? Right. Okay. Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, I had a couple of questions. Let me get to this.
I do have a question if you want to let me go.
Okay, go ahead, Chair.
Thanks. This might be just a question for Steve or Jaco, and this, sorry, this wasn't one that was sent out to you, but do any of these contractors that were, do they provide services for any other county departments? Or is it all through IT, and then if they're dealing with other departments, they're just dealing with them through IT? Like, there's no other departments that have them on contract separately
Correct.
for different
Everything
things?
flows through IT.
Got it.
But these contractors might be at the jail for 1 month and might be in the circuit court building
But they're all
another
still
month.
under this
They're
contract?
all under the umbrella of IT.
Okay. And then I mentioned I was talking to Steve earlier, and maybe if Steve wouldn't mind coming up and just explaining the IRS implications, because when we were talking about community action for hours on end about part-time workers and IRS implications, Steve said that there's some differences here, and I think maybe it's best that everybody understand
Yeah,
the
so if you
differences.
remember, there was a request on our part to reclassify some independent contractors to employees or part-time employees. And at the time, I was explaining that the main concern for the IRS with independent contractors is you're having employees who are really doing work or individuals that are being paid as independent contractors that are really doing work like employees. And the primary concern on the part of the IRS is that we as the vendor or the payee or payor is that we're paying money to an individual who may not necessarily be paying all their withholding taxes into the IRS on a quarterly basis, self-employment tax and federal withholdings and such and so forth. So that concern goes away with the IRS if you're paying a company, because these folks are getting a paycheck and those companies are required to file all the appropriate tax forms just as we are as an employer ourselves. So there's always an appearance when you're paying a company of a separation there. And so that concern, as I said, goes away when you're paying a company, because the IRS is getting their taxes, is really what's going on. That's their concern.
Okay, and I think we did put a question into Corporation Counsel just to, on the legal side of that, and I don't doubt that, you're well aware of this, but I will say that our counsel had a differing opinion on that, and I mean, maybe just not understanding it the way that you do or not, but I mean, we're going to try our best to check into it, and even with John Shapka tomorrow, just to make sure that he says the same things, because, I mean, there's a lot of these contractors, and I understand the difference. They work for a company, but a lot of people don't even realize that they're contractors. So, I mean, they really look like employees, but as long as that, like what you were saying, is the way that the IRS looks at it, then obviously it wouldn't be a problem if, if they dressed like the person sitting
my
next to 'em.
concerns go away when we are paying folks through contractual agreements with corporations or partnerships, that kind of thing.
Okay.
As long as we're not paying them as individuals. Yeah.
All right, thank you, Steve.
Thank you. Commissioner Brown?
Thank you. I had a question that I don't think I received the answer to, which was regarding, the one item that was up on our contract for us to approve, and we went on our computers and found it for 45% less. And wanted to know, what is it that we're purchasing that's 44% more than what we looked at that may be the same thing or may not be, but I was curious as to who that purchasing person was that,
Yeah, well, I'm sorry, I can't answer that, and I thought we answered all the questions, but Jacob will be here tomorrow. If for some reason he's not, one of his representatives will
we'll send
be
another
here.
note. Just
Yeah, add it
just
to
flag
anything
it.
else you
Yeah,
have.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that can be
just-
answered tomorrow.
I mean, it's a simple thing, just to make
Sure.
sure, it's probably just apples and oranges, right?
Sure.
But we need to know.
Right.
Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Romano?
Thank you, Madam Chair. For Mr. Schmiegel, if I may, I'm going to go along with, or piggyback what the chair said, Mr. Smith. These independent contracts, are there any of them that are a individual incorporated as one, and that's the name of their company? Or is it an actual company that employs these people, if you know what I'm asking? Is there anybody that's filed as an individual incorporated himself, doing business as, and we still make the check to them, but there's no company involved and there's only one individual?
I don't know that. We have so many vendors, and I don't know if there's, of all of our vendors, which ones are actually individuals. If they are incorporated as a single person, they should be filing all of their own tax returns and cutting themselves checks from their corporation or partnership, whatever it may happen to be.
Okay, that's my only concern.
But I couldn't tell you, without going through our whole vendor list, which ones are individuals that have incorporated as a corporation of one.
So I wouldn't want the IRS to show up and say, hey, do you know this is an individual of one, and he hasn't filed anything? Your reply has to be, we've sent it to the company, and we're clean as far as we're concerned. What that company does, even if it's one, that's their business, got
Yeah.
nothing to do with us.
Our response would be, they're a corporation, it's not our problem that that corporation didn't pay in their payroll taxes.
Thank you.
And I'll remind the board, what happened 8 or 9 years ago was, we had an individual that we were paying as an independent contractor. That person, I believe, got in trouble filing their tax returns. They reported to the IRS, like, oh, wait a minute, I should be an employee. And so I believe they were not paying in their taxes, and they got into some kind of difficulties when they filed their tax returns. But again, Commissioner, our response, if we were paying a corporation, was that corporation, regardless if it's a corporation of 1 or 100,000, should be filing their own proper tax returns. Yeah.
Okay, Commissioner Leonetti.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just curious, is purchasing going to be here tomorrow too? Do we know? You're here now from purchasing, right? Yeah, this is Jeff. Yeah, Jeff, maybe I have a question for you. And I don't know if you can answer it because it really came out of IT. And it's going along with what Commissioner Brown was talking about. And I'll give you some detail. There was a company, I think it's called M&J, if you're familiar with that company.
Yes.
And what happened was IT, and I think the last name of the person who did it was Augusti. That's not you, is it?
No.
No, okay.
No, he's the help desk supervisor.
Okay, so
Anthony
Augusti had requested 15 Snagit software units. Okay, are you familiar with Snagit?
No, I'm not.
Okay, so Snagit's a software program that anything you see on your computer screen, if it's like a video or anything, you can just take your cursor and highlight it, and it'll like download it into an MP4 format. So like if you're watching YouTube, you could, put something there, a news thing on your computer, you can capture it. I use it in my business. So I was looking through the documents, and I noticed that M&J was asked by Augusti to get 15 units of Snagit. And the county paid $42.55 per unit, okay? I thought, well, let me look. When I looked directly from the company that sells Snagit, they even have a program for governmental agencies or businesses where they give deep discounts. And they were offering, if you had 15 units or more, you could have purchased it for $30.55, directly from them, So I guess my question is, like, who is M&J? How often do we use them? Because obviously what happened was Augusti said, hey, we need to get this Snagit software. And the next thing you know, M&J said, no problem, we'll get it for you. And they get it to us for $42. I know they have to make money too, but
Right.
It's just something like that. I know it's a small amount, but I just want to know a little bit more about how that process works.
Well, we have a long relationship with MNJ, and we've had great service and great pricing. I can tell you that from shopping around and previously purchasing some IT technology. We've had a new rep lately, and maybe he isn't versed in the government contracts, but that's something I'm definitely going to follow back up with on that item. And just to circle back on another question, I think Commissioner Brown had about computers that you found that may have been cheaper than what we were using. And I just want to remind the board that there is a difference between the consumer end of a product and like a business and government model. It's a lot more beefed up, and the costs go up because your home computer is only meant to check email for maybe an hour. Ours run continually, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, so that updates can be made on them. So that's another thing just to consider, that you have to make sure you're looking at the exact same products.
Okay, I'll ask the rest of my questions.
Okay.
I'll send them over to the deputy executive, and then. But thank you, I appreciate that.
welcome.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Gillette.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a thought following up on Commissioner Leonetti's point was that obviously the company that we asked to grab these Snagit programs from is going to tack something on. They're not, they're there to make a profit. So I just wonder if there's any way that we could think about what items we request to our own purchasing department versus which ones may require some specialist ability to go out and obtain or whatever it might be. I don't know the answer to that, but maybe this brings up something that we can look into improving in some capacity. So that's all. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we got the disclosure forms, and I know they were dated in the last 2 days, and I just have a question about a couple of them. With respect to item M, Metro Technologies, because we do have individuals directly in that department who have family members working for the company, as opposed to, I think our ethics thing is a little bit too stringent. I think it's unrealistic countywide to expect that there's no employees in all of these places, and I think that's something that we should fix. But I am concerned when it's directly out of that department, because that's an indication to me that maybe something. So here's my biggest question: is what size? How many employees are there at Metro Technology Services, and are they all working for the county in some capacity, or maybe through partners in architecture, but doing county work?
I can't, Jaco could speak to that.
Yeah,
and
I didn't think
if
you'd
you
be
could
able
put
to
on the
answer
list.
it. Right.
But I can tell you, only because the name's listed here on Metro Tech's vendor disclosure form, that none of these people, these employees that are listed, two things, none of the employees that are listed are in a supervisory role where they have the ability to approve contracts or issue POs. Okay, so I think that's important to note. It all comes either under Jaco or the purchasing manager, Miss Gunn, the name at the top there. It says she's assigned to the warehouse. She's not a supervisor, but the purchasing manager oversees that position. The other two names, one is a database administrator, and another one, it says PM, is a project manager. Again, none of those have the authority to issue contracts, issue POs, or anything like that.
No, but they're probably working directly with the individuals in the...
That I don't know. But I do know in the field of technology, from my previous career, that many times you will get employees whose son or daughter aspires to be in a tech field, and when there's large technology projects going on, if they could hire them as an intern or summer help or something like that, just to kind of dip their toes in the water as they may be pursuing a degree in the area of technology. It's a pretty popular ask.
Okay, and when we do sit down and go through that ordinance, I think really important that you're in that process.
Yes, I would. Again, I would just ask that you add that to the list, and if I can get it by tomorrow morning, I'll let Jaco know. Copy Jaco as well, just like you did.
Okay, and then the second one was the Michigan Consulting Group LLC. So this is one individual, and it's $160 a year. I mean, $160,000 a year, which that seems awfully high to me. I know it's a very specialized position, but I'm wondering also, is this a company of one?
Yeah.
It is a company of one.
I meant, yes, I understand what you mean.
It's one individual, but
Add
is
it to
it
the
a
list.
company of one?
Right.
As opposed to going with a national established company
Sure.
that. So I'm curious to know if that is a company of one. I realize we get one individual from that company, but is it a company of one?
Okay. We'll have
Okay.
that answer for you tomorrow.
Okay. Those are the only two that I had any questions on. Okay, thank you. Chair Smith.
Mark, I'm not sure, maybe Steve would know this. Just to follow up on that, I thought that last year we paid this person $200,000 a year. And if that's the case, I thought I remembered seeing that at some point, and maybe I'm wrong, and if that's the case, why is it less this year? So maybe
Well,
that's more of a question.
On Monday, and I don't know what the exact numbers are, but on Monday at the infrastructure meeting, Jaco had informed the board that he's been trying every year to reduce his reliance on contracted services. And I think 3 or 4 years ago, his predecessor had spent a little over $1 million from these companies. He also demonstrated, and I don't know if they're part of the public record, that in every year it has gone down by a couple of $100,000. And what he's asking for this year, cumulatively from these contracts that are before you, is maybe another $100,000 less than it was last year. So he's continuing to try to reduce his reliance as he grows his staff. I know a lot of times the question is when we ask for new hires, and that's not the case this year relative to this, but the question sometimes has been asked, well, can't we hire it out cheaper? You know, and in some, yeah, you know, there's some merit to that. Sometimes we can, especially if it's a specialized service, because we couldn't get web developers or whatever these people do. We couldn't afford to pay them the hourly rate they're going to get. So in our case, it would be cheaper to hire them out. And I think Jaco has done a wonderful job in not only enhancing and growing our technology, but having it serviced by professionals and at the same time trying to decrease our reliance on contracted services.
Okay, and I know I missed Monday, but I'd be interested to hear from him tomorrow where if that has dropped $40,000 kind of if our own staff has picked up that difference or how,
Yep.
I mean,
Okay.
just what's more concern like that. Okay.
Thanks.
And very quickly, I know these were all put together very quickly to sort of write a situation, so I didn't know who did that. I didn't know if Finance did that or if Jaco did that.
Jaco did that last
Okay.
night, and I think about 9 o'clock last night, he transmitted everything to Crystal.
No, I mean the contracts that he sent over to us
Oh.
for 2 days ago.
Yeah.
Those.
All the contracts came from Corporation Counsel, so in terms of the contract language, all of that came from Corp Counsel. It wasn't something that Jaco wrote up himself.
Okay, and I was just, because somebody missed the vendor disclosure forms, and I was just wondering what department threw those together is all. But you know who did it, so that's good enough.
Okay, good enough, thanks.
All right, thank you. Are you back on, Commissioner Drillette, or did you just not remove? Okay. All right, with that, please vote. Okay, motion passes, Commissioner Drillette voting no. Justice and Public Safety Committee recommendations, should we take A, B, and C in their entirety? Motion by Romano, supported by Drillette. Any questions? Please vote. Motion passes unanimously. Government Operations Committee recommendations, Budget Amendment Clerk's Office to fund overtime. Is there a motion? Moved by Toko, supported by Sauger. Please vote. Motion passes unanimously. Proclamation honoring the 2017-18, is that trap team? Is it really trap? Is it track? Oh, track, okay. Honoring the.
We're animal critter trappers. We shoot trap, not people.
We trap some critters down in the south end too, but they're rather undesirable. Motion honoring the 2017-18 Richmond High School trap team for winning the 2018 state championship title. Is there a motion? Moved by Brown, supported by Leonetti. Please
Make a little
vote.
editorial comment.
Oh, okay,
For the
go
good of the
ahead.
board. Across the state, what's happening is that high schools are partnering with local sportsmen's clubs to offer archery and trap shooting as options. So they're forming leagues. And high schools throughout the north end of Macomb County and St. Clair and throughout the state are forming these teams and are having statewide competitions. It's becoming really popular. It's soaring. It's really amazing. And the kids can get credit. They get letters on their jackets for participating, even though it's run by the local sportsman's club with certified NRI compliant trainers. It's really interesting. And archery too is another area where they're growing and expanding, partnering with the school districts. It's really kind of cool. It's a win-win for everybody, and it's really taken off. And it just started about 3 years ago, and it's really just blossomed. North Macomb, I'm a member of, hosts. We've got 5 schools and tied into that program. It's quite busy. So anyway, FYI.
Thank you, Commissioner Brown. Yes, vote, please. Oh, sorry, motion passes 13-0. New business. I just have one quick thing. Okay, I just have one quick thing. You guys have noticed I've been breaking out in laughter up here. I got all kinds of stuff going on. I press the button to speak just like you guys do. Sometimes my name's up there 3 times, sometimes they all disappear. This thing's been going haywire since I sat down, and this thing has worked, about 50% of the time. So I just kept laughing because my name was popping up by itself or disappearing by itself. So anyway, Chair Smith.
So, i.e., I'm not crazy. That's the take of that.
Yeah, I'm not crazy.
All right, I just wanted to let everybody know that Commissioner Carabelli and I will be meeting tomorrow morning with Marilyn Lane, Deputy Executive Delden, and Deputy Executive Lorenzo to discuss some of the issues that have been going on in the recent weeks, and including the lawsuit. That being said, I'm holding off on a lot of my questions still on this, on the contracts and everything, that we just went off until tomorrow's meeting. But I will say that I have some questions about them, and my concerns. I've talked to Steve about is what process are we putting in place to make sure that this kind of thing doesn't happen again, and that's going to be part of the discussion tomorrow morning, and I'm anticipating, a good discussion on that. And then we'll talk more about, the results of at least what's come out of the discussions tomorrow. Obviously, Commissioner Carabelli and I aren't making any commitments or we're 2 of 13 that are going to go and at least listen to what's going to be said tomorrow, and then we'll be happy to tomorrow at new business report what was said and where we can get together, if what direction we might think we want to go on, if there's any proposals, and we can go from there. But I just want to let everybody know that we're having that meeting tomorrow morning, and be happy to discuss some of the things that come out of it, or anything that might possibly come out of it with all of you. But correct. Well, here's the deal. There may be some discussion on the lawsuit, but our the discussions don't have to be with attorneys necessarily. You can work towards settlement on any lawsuit up until the day that it's settled. So no attorneys there. It's just going to be our group, and like I said, I was contacted by them, so I'm happy to think that maybe we can move forward towards what I think is, some pretty simple solutions to get things moving in the right direction. Any other questions?
Thank you. Commissioner Sauger.
Yeah, I'd just like to have our staff consider in the future, don't have to do it now, but we could combine a couple of these meetings a week. Sometimes these meetings only last 40 minutes. Combine them with another one, and we can do that, okay? Just think about it, and that's all I got to say. Thank you.
Thought these were combined versions. Okay. All right, so with that, motion to adjourn by Kraft, support. Oh, I'm sorry. There's nobody out there. Public participation. Does anyone wish to be heard? Does anyone, seeing none, public participation is closed. Motion by Kraft, supported by Carabelli. Please vote.